All right. Please keep introducing yourself in the chat if you're just getting on the call. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So to introduce myself, my name is Diana Griffin. I'm a senior product manager here at Nava. I'm thrilled to be here today joining colleagues Britt Gilmore from Imagine LA, Eric Gianella from Georgetown University's Better Government Lab, and my teammate here at Nava, Fuad Green. We'll be talking about our work to develop and pilot an AI-powered assistive chatbot to enhance access to public benefit programs. As you're listening to the presentation today, feel free to type any questions that come up for you into the Zoom Q&A feature. Try to keep them in the Q&A, not in the chat. And then we will hold some time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that come up. And I do want to note that today we're sharing a point in time of this project. We're still in the midst of working on it. So you can find recordings of our previous demo days talking about earlier phases of the work. Those are on our website. And we will continue to share out as we progress through the work through the next phases. So in our time today, we'll give a brief overview of the shape and the scope of our project, talk about our pilot partnership with Imagine LA, then we'll demo the assistive chatbot that we're piloting. And from there, we'll dive into a look under the hood at the technical approaches we use to build it. We'll wrap up by sharing about how we're evaluating the impact of the chatbot and validating our hypotheses about how it can support access to benefits. But before we get going, I do want to recognize and celebrate the team and the partners whose hard work we're highlighting today. It's a real privilege to collaborate with this group, and I'm so excited to be able to share what we've been doing with you all today. So let me start out by grounding in the scope and the goals of the work. The project overall is researching, prototyping, and testing open source AI-powered tools to assist caseworkers who help people navigate and enroll in benefits. And as many of you on the call are aware, navigating and enrolling in health and human services benefits can be challenging because the policies and the processes are complex. Many people need help from benefits navigators like call center agents, caseworkers, and outreach specialists. And the organizations that provide these benefits navigation services face a number of administration challenges. It can be costly to train staff. There's often high turnover. Call center wait times are often just untenable. And navigators themselves face multiple administrative burdens. And in order to have an impact in this problem space, we are working with many partners, notably our philanthropic funders at the Gates Foundation, our evaluation partners from Georgetown Better Government Lab, and our implementation and pilot partners, Imagine LA. We've also partnered with an advisory board of beneficiaries with lived experience navigating benefits, which we shared about in a previous demo day. And we're currently working with an advisory board of caseworker navigators in LA County. We've taken a phased approach through this project. So starting with discovery, building proofs of concept, focused prototyping, and now piloting. And today we're going to share about the third phase where we refined our assistive chatbot prototype in preparation for the pilot that is running now. Throughout the project, we've maintained an emphasis on testing, evaluation, and learning, and that includes engaging staff and families every step of the way to get feedback. And lastly, I do want to emphasize that our project focuses on AI solutions with a human in the loop, meaning that it's focused on caseworkers rather than end beneficiaries of these programs. And the goal is that caseworker experience and expertise combined with the AI solutions that support them will ultimately result in better enrollment and referral outcomes. And this approach helps us mitigate rights and safety risks that can be associated with AI solutions. And it ensures that we validate the appropriateness of the problem solution fit and confirm whether and how these prototypes fit into staff workflows and address administrative burdens before we scale that implementation beyond a pilot and beyond that caseworker focus. So now, before we jump into sharing what we built, I'm going to introduce Britt Gilmore from Imagine LA to share about their work and the Benefit Navigator tool.
Thanks, Diana. Great to be here with all of you. I'm Britt Gilmore. I'm one of the co-founders of the Benefit Navigator, alongside my other co-founder, Jill Bauman. just to explain what the Benefit Navigator is, it's a one-stop shop screening tool for case managers that assesses eligibility for most of the public benefits and tax credits available to LA County residents. And we will be expanding outside of LA County later this year. The Benefit Navigator also has a benefit information hub, which was ingested into the chatbot LLM, and it lays out all the critical need to know information about the public benefits and tax credits in simple language. And lastly, the Benefit Navigator has a scenario planning feature, which allows you to see how benefit amounts are impacted as income changes or other household factors change. The Benefit Navigator was born out of 18 years of Imagine LA directly serving families who are exiting homelessness and supporting them on the path out of poverty. Additionally, I had experience running a social enterprise called the Giving Keys for 7 years that employed people that were also transitioning out of homelessness. And some things that my co-founder and I both experienced on the Giving Keys side was that employees on our team, we would promote them. And we had several instances where that pay increase would bump them out of a housing subsidy or other critical benefits that they were receiving. And similarly, Imagine LA's families had a lot of fear around taking on work or more work for fear of losing critical benefits that they relied on. In 2019, Imagine LA kicked off an economic mobility initiative that included connecting Imagine LA's families with living wage career pathways. And very early on in that process, we knew we needed to be able to have a holistic conversation about what was going to happen to these families' benefits as they started to earn more money. We really needed a tool like the Benefit Navigator, but it didn't exist. And so we commissioned some research on the benefit cliff landscape in LA County with the USC Price Center for Social Innovation. And that report, which was published in 2021, really validated the need for a digital tool that would centralize the benefit screening process and also provide the ability to forecast what happens to benefits as income changes. So empowered by that body of research, plus the 18 years of working directly with families, we built the Benefit Navigator with a team of paid lived expertise advisors. We had the MVP of the Benefit Navigator alpha tested with DPSS here in LA County in the fall of 2022, just to really validate that the outputs and calculations that we were running were accurate, because providing trusted information in this situation is super critical. And then we launched our initial pilot in March of 2023, which ran for 6 months with 10 agencies here in LA County. And coming out of that pilot, 8 of the 10 agencies really validated the need for the tool. They were like, please don't take the Benefit Navigator away. It's really assisting us in our work. So we moved into an extended pilot, which we are still in right now with 55 agencies and 500 case managers that will wrap up in July. But something to note is that as a part of our pilot process, we end up having a conversation built into that structure of the pilot with each of our users every 3 months to collect feedback and collectively build out the product roadmap based on that feedback. And in those feedback sessions, we heard things that did demonstrate a need for a chatbot type experience within the Benefit Navigator. And those things sounded like, sometimes my clients has questions about their case that I can't answer without digging a little deeper. I wish I could just ask an expert while I'm sitting there in the tool with my client, so they don't have to wait for me to find out an answer and get back to them. Other things that we heard were, I love that everything is centralized in one place in the Benefit Navigator, but when I'm working with a patient, I have very little time. And sometimes just getting a preliminary understanding of the eligibility rules is all I need for that short conversation with my patient to get them going on the next step. So we heard lots of things in those feedback sessions to support the need for a chatbot type experience that they could get answers on demand. But those are just some examples. And so our 2 core guiding principles are human-centered design and trusted information. So when Nava approached us about the chatbot pilot, we leapt at the chance to get this chatbot built into our interface. And I'm really excited to hand it back to the Nava team to walk you through how the chatbot works. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you, Britt. So I'm going to jump out of the slides here. Oh, just kidding. I'm going to, there we go. Jump out of the slides, jump into the Benefit Navigator itself. And as Britt just alluded to, the goal of integrating an assistive chatbot into the Benefit Navigator tool, and as Britt just described, the Benefit Navigator as a whole is being piloted with a larger group The chatbot is sort of a pilot within the pilot, working with a smaller group of those case managers. Excuse me. But the goal is to help those caseworkers who have questions as they're working with clients get answers from trusted benefits information. So they can open the chatbot right here in the Benefit Navigator, and having it available in the tool where they're already working is already a big value add to those caseworkers. They already have to navigate multiple different systems and websites in the course of supporting clients. They don't want to have to leave their workflow to get an answer. And when the chatbot is part of the Benefit Navigator, it also helps set expectations about the scope of what it can answer. It's not an Ask Me Anything tool. It's designed to cover the same breadth of programs and tax credits that the Benefit Navigator covers. And you can see in the interface here, it shows that list of benefits and tax credits up front when you first open it. That helps the user ground in what it can and can't answer. We get the chatbot to stay within the scope by constraining it to draw its responses only from referencing a predefined set of documents. And that's specifically a set of trusted sources of truth for state and local benefits that we identified based on Imagine LA's expertise and research that we did with caseworkers in their network. So I can ask it a question. I'm just going to ask about state disability insurance. I'm just going to say SDI. And when I ask a question about this program, it takes a moment to find the documents we gave it on that topic and generate a response based on that information. So in a moment here, as it's pulling that response, you should see it has found the relevant content we gave it from, in this case, the California Employment Development Department website. So you're seeing two parts of the chatbot's answers here. On top, that's the LLM's summarized response, the content generated by the AI. And then below that, we've got citations that it provides to support the response. And importantly, these citations are direct quotes from the source content. They are not touched by the LLM, which is really important for allowing caseworkers to review where the chatbot got its information and verify its summarized response. And if the caseworker wants to dig deeper, they can follow the link to go directly to the web page that the citation is quoting. They can also take advantage of the LLM's inherent capabilities like summarizing and translating. So they might want to say that in simpler language. The chatbot can reference what it responded before and just simplify that in more plain language. LLMs are also pretty good at translation. So I can say, how do I say that in Spanish or another language? And it should, again, be able to reference what it had answered and translate that. For our pilot phase, we have not yet done really in-depth evaluation of the chatbot's translation abilities, but that would be something to pursue before scaling beyond a pilot. Okay, now, I'm sure that some of you have spent time navigating benefits information and policy before, and you are probably already thinking, what if the source of truth itself is out of date? I'm going to run a question here about CalFresh. What are the CalFresh work requirements? We don't have a perfect solution in place for that problem of the source of truth being out of date, but for our pilot, we've implemented, you can see at the top here, it's a way to catch certain topics that we know are out of date in the policy manual, for example, and flag that in the chatbot's response. So in this case, there's currently a waiver in place through October of this year that is not reflected in the source content in the policy manual. So it's just surfacing that current state and calling out that even though the rest of the answer is referencing the policy manual, just flagging to be aware that it might be out of date and might need reference to the most current waiver, but it still gives the response and it still does provide that citation to what the policy manual says. If the caseworker notices an issue or just has trouble with that type of response, at any time they can give us feedback. So they can give us just the quick sort of good, bad response, but they also have the option to tell us what's going on. In this case, I might flag the policy is out of date. They can send that. Of course, we're monitoring that very closely, and that gives us some insight that allows us to notice when perhaps we need to add an update about a different policy or just make some changes to help the chatbot perform better. So far, I've talked about how the chatbot handles questions that are within the scope of the content it uses to respond. I'm sure you're also curious about what it does if you ask it a question outside that scope. So one example is that, of course, folks are always looking for specific local resources. That's not something that we have content within the chatbot to answer right now, but we know it's a common benefits related topic, and there are many of these that are not yet covered by the source content we've given the chatbot. And we've accounted for those topics by instead at least giving the chatbot instructions to provide a trusted external link that can help with that specific topic. So in this example, you can see it has responded basically, I don't know about food pantries, but you can find out about food pantry locations here. And this will link out to a local resource listing for food pantries. Of course, there are other topics that either we haven't yet anticipated questions about, or we simply don't want the chatbot responding about. One example might be, let's see, how do I get SNAP in Oregon? I'm kind of not typo, but not typing perfectly here. And that's one of the benefits of the LLM is that it can handle that. In this case, you can see we don't want it trying to answer questions about benefits in another state. It's really constrained to California and right now to the LA area. And it's smart enough to recognize that even though it does have content about SNAP in its data sources, SNAP in Oregon is a different topic, and it knows it shouldn't try to answer that. All right, I'm going to jump out of the demo here, jump back into the slides, and just continue on with a quick recap before we jump into the technical details. So what we just talked through was when the user prompts the chatbot, it's doing a few things behind the scenes to generate a response. It's checking for specific knowledge from its source documents. It's going through those guardrails. Is this a topic I should answer about? Do I have trusted info to use to answer? Are there any policy changes I need to flag? And then I didn't specifically demo this, but if the user had asked a question in another language, it can recognize what language that was and generate its response in the same language. And then lastly, it's going to choose the citations it should provide to support its answer. Brings all that together, shows the response. And then as I briefly mentioned, behind the scenes, we're monitoring what's happening. We're manually looking at it and evaluating the accuracy. We're doing automated testing, and we're paying attention to that user feedback so we can learn and iterate on what we've built. So next, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Fuad Green, who's going to share a little bit about how we built all of this functionality, how we got the chatbot into the place it is today.
Thanks, Diana. Hi, I'm Fuad Green. Today I'll be sharing our experience building our assistive chatbot designed specifically for benefit navigators. I'll walk through the key challenges we faced, as well as some of our solutions. So we saw a similar slide before, but at its core, our system follows a retrieval augmented generation, otherwise known as RAG architecture. This approach takes user questions, retrieves relevant policy information, and this allows responses generated by the large language model, an LLM, to be accurate and provided with the retrieved context. Our first major challenge was managing diverse policy documentation. We needed to ingest and structure content from many different agencies like California's Employment Development Department, WIC, and others. Each have their own unique document formats and organizational layouts on their websites. Traditional approaches result in LLMs responding without meaningful program context. For example, a section titled eligibility requirements, it loses its meaning when separated from its program context. Are the requirements from WIC or from DPSS? Without this context, the LLM can't provide accurate information. To solve this, we developed an approach using tree-based semantic chunking. Unlike traditional token-based chunking, which breaks content into arbitrary segments of a preset length, our approach analyzes the heading structure of documents to then build a hierarchical representation of each document. This preserves the document's natural organization and ensures each chunk maintains its full context. You can see what this looks like in practice. On the left, the formatted structure of the headers, subheaders, and their content. On the right, we see token-based chunking creates fragments with incomplete context, whereas with tree-based chunking, we preserve that full hierarchy in each chunk. This is crucial for maintaining meaningful relationships between headers, subheaders, and their content. Okay, I'll quickly touch on some of the technical details about how document chunks do get stored in our database. This is a bit more in depth, and for those who might be interested in the implementation, we use the MPNet embedding model and map the processed documents into a high dimensional space. MPNet uses 768 dimensions. These embeddings are then stored in Postgres. We use the PG vector extension to create a vector store. This allows our system to do efficient semantic search with high retrieval accuracy, all while maintaining low response times. With structured data in place, our next challenge is to ensure the retrieval is consistent and high quality across diverse benefit questions. Different content types need different handling, and we needed objective ways to measure their performance. Let's look at this a bit more on the next slide. Our solution was to understand what content is being retrieved for use in the LLM's response in conversation. We built an automated question generation system using OpenAI's GPT-4o Mini to create realistic question-answer pairs directly from our document chunks. This test set, the synthetic test set, allows us to experiment systematically. For example, we discovered that increasing the number of documents retrieved from 5 to 25 increased the number of times we retrieved the right document by about 20%. We also identified that different data sets, like some of those mentioned earlier, including WIC and EDD, can respond differently to the change in the number of documents we retrieve, which is intuitive if we thought about it. So this means that some data sets, whether it's their content structure or other factors, may respond better to an even higher number of documents retrieved. Ensuring accurate retrieval is only part of the solution. We faced a few challenges beyond just finding the right information. For instance, if a user asked a question that couldn't be addressed by pulling information from our own document database, then we needed to classify these questions as out of scope. We also wanted to focus on how we make complex policy information accessible and understandable for all users. And there are times when policy updates happen frequently. So as we mentioned earlier, as Dan had shown, we focus not just on handling real-time updates of policies, but also letting the user know if a policy had been recently updated. We took a two-stage approach that we can look more into on the next slide. Okay, so in the first step, we perform an intelligent message analysis. This determines if the retrieval is necessary. It identifies any handling requirements, and it detects the right language to respond in for non-English questions. This level of routing ensures, for example, that password reset questions go to support rather than triggering a policy search, or to respond in Spanish if the user asks a question in Spanish. The second step handles the structured response generation with consistent guardrails. We aim for a plain, accessible language with consistent formatting of the citations returned when documents are available. One ongoing tricky part to note here is that LLMs do naturally tend to mirror the formal, complex language that is found in policy documents they're citing. Getting the model to translate policy language into that clear everyday language without losing its accuracy has been an area of focus. We're constantly refining this stage of the prompt to make information more accessible while maintaining its accuracy. Another key component of our system is how we do that citation processing. We're aiming for references to be displayed clearly and in a way that is easy to follow. One example is how we do the numbering of the citations, as the indexes in the vector store may differ than what we see on the user interface. We also provide breadcrumb navigation showing which documents the citations are being pulled from. This gives the user a line of traceability, allowing them to easily go back, click into any information in the source documents that they might want to follow up on. I'll spend a moment here talking about our approach to continuous improvement based on real-world usage. We've implemented ways to get user feedback both on the front end in the chatbot, but also on the back end. Behind the scenes, we've integrated a tool called Literal AI for detailed logging of these user interactions. It's also capturing the entire thread of the user's questions, the chatbot's responses, as well as the rich metadata about the conversation, like which benefits the user was routed to, and any citation sources that were referenced. Lastly, we develop tools that then enable our research and design teams to quickly identify patterns and prioritize targeted improvements, both to how we embed and store the policy documents, as well as to how the responses are generated. We're finding that keeping experts in the loop ensures our system gets smarter with each interaction. And to wrap this up, throughout this project, we've learned several valuable lessons. First, tree-based semantic chunking does provide a great deal of meaning for the policy documents we primarily work with. Second, two-step processing gives us the reliable guardrails that we would otherwise not get from a single prompt system. And additionally, we've found our approach to evaluation gives us improvements that we can now measure very well. And finally, having experts involved to evaluate feedback is essential for continuing to iterate on our tool, making it the best it can be for our users. With that, I'll pass over to Eric. Thank you.
Right, so I'll talk about how we step from that evaluation to an evaluation of how the chatbot affects human performance. So how do changes in chatbot accuracy affect human accuracy? This is work that I'm doing with collaborators from the Information School at Cornell, as well as a postdoc at Georgetown, Xiaowen Guo. Next slide, please. This work is funded by the NSF Program on Responsible Design, Development, and Deployment of Technologies. The big picture idea here is that there are a lot of applications of LLM-based tools to public services right now, and there aren't a lot of general ways to evaluate these tools. So what we're trying to do here is pilot our own way of having a systematic approach to evaluating some of the trade-offs inherent in using these tools, particularly when it's mediated by a human, somebody like a benefits navigator. And here what we're looking at specifically is, does this improve navigation? So next slide. So what do we mean by better navigation? We're wondering whether this increases accuracy relative to humans by themselves, whether this mitigates biases. So if you look at question accuracy by circumstance or by question topic, whether this reduces administrative burdens like cognitive effort for benefits navigators, and whether this increases navigator speed. Next slide, please. Our research has three parts, which overlap to some extent with what I've just presented. And the first is our offline survey experiment, where we have representative but synthetic scenarios that we present to individuals, and we show some individuals chatbot suggestions, and we don't show them to others. We have baseline and endpoint surveys. So we ask about things like workload and what aspects of work are difficult before and after chatbot use. And we also analyze chat logs and metadata. Next slide. All of the key kind of research questions that we're interested in are at least in part informed by the experiment part of the research design. So I'm going to focus on the experiment today. Next slide. And next slide. So to create these representative but synthetic scenarios, we relied on Snap quality control data that has a representative set of errors made in Snap cases across the whole country. And you can segment this based on particular issues or circumstances that you're interested in. We then have, so we generate, using LLMs, we generate questions. Then we have human experts who are state quality control auditors from 2 states. Look at those questions, select which ones are useful or not, then revise the questions, provide us with answers. Then we have reviewers from another state check those answers and tell us if there's state level differences in answers. Tag question difficulty. And this is all for the sake of constructing a benchmarking data set. So we think that given the kind of carefulness with which Nava has gone through this process, we'll be able to release a benchmarking data set along with pretty like aggressive or ambitious standards. Let's see. So our offline experiment, we're presenting 2 sets of information to the chatbot. One is about client attributes. So that's things like employment status. Are they not in the labor force? Are they self-employed? Do they work for others? Age. So rules, eligibility rules change for people of different ages. Gender, there's almost nothing varies based on gender in the context of SNAP, but this is purely to see what happens when you provide the LLM with different gender. Mixed immigration status households versus all US citizen households, healthcare disability status, and all our questions are about CalFresh. So we just want to be clear about that because otherwise it will ask us to clarify. The questions are multiple choice questions so that it's easy to score these. And here you can see a question where it is kind of contingent on the fact that somebody's a senior or they're disabled, whether they're able to deduct these expenses from their income. Next slide, please. So the experiment itself has 3 arms. First, there are participants who are taking a 45-question exam by themselves. So they'll be answering questions like the one you just saw. There will be people who are answering a very similar exam, but also are seeing suggestions. And then there's a chatbot taking the exam on its own. Next slide. Just to give you a sense of what I mean here. So if you're a human taking the exam by yourself, you see a question just like this. Next slide. And if you're in the condition where you're receiving chatbot help, you'd see a suggestion come up like this that you're told may be accurate or inaccurate. So, to use your judgment in deciding whether to take that into account. Next slide. And then for the chatbot alone scenario, so if you were just to use this as a benchmarking tool for Nava's system and then use that to compare other implementations of chatbots for Snap, we have to prompt it to choose a multiple choice answer. It's not necessarily a given that it's going to take a standardized test for us. Next slide, please. And one of the things here that we think is interesting that coincided with some of the concerns that were coming up with on the Nava team was what happens when the chatbot gets really accurate and people aren't sure whether they should trust themselves anymore in terms of what they know. So one of the things that we're doing is artificially varying chatbot accuracy so that we can see if there are key points at which people start to use the chatbot guidance despite knowing better. So next slide. So one of the things here that we need to do first is generate responses that are correct and incorrect. This is actually kind of challenging. Generating incorrect responses is tough, even if you can vary the entropy in the chatbot. So, and then we create these chatbot responses that are reviewed by quality control auditors to ensure that they are in fact correct or incorrect. And we match those with the question answer pairs. And so then we can construct a test that's unique for participants. And we can say chatbot in the participant A's case will be 50% accurate, and participant B's case will be 75, and participant C will see 100%. And why are we doing this? Because we want to get at some of the kind of behavioral interaction issues that might generalize beyond the kind of immediate instantiation of LLMs today and the application with ImagineLA and their partners. So we're using this in a sense to kind of bootstrap a more general approach to assessing how do people react to changing chatbot quality. Next slide. So recap, we compare human versus human plus chatbots in terms of accuracy on representative snap questions. We measure current state, accuracy alone, and we also vary the accuracy of the chatbot to examine how human usage changes in response. Again, big picture, we're hoping to help build more generalizable, comparable ways to evaluate chatbots in the context of public services.
All right, thank you so much, Eric. That is great to hear about. So kind of wrapping up the us talking at you portion before we jump into some questions that I see coming in. Just wanted to share what's coming next in this project. So as we've mentioned throughout, we are currently piloting with caseworkers in the ImagineLA network, and that pilot runs through May. Through piloting, we're evaluating our hypotheses further. We're assessing questions that Eric and others have mentioned. So do these tools actually reduce burdens for navigators and make their jobs easier? Do they provide them information they didn't know or couldn't easily find? And ultimately, does supporting these tools lead to better outcomes in terms of accessing benefits, those impact and outcome level of evaluation, along with, of course, the assessment of the chatbot's capabilities and performance itself. We are very excited to share more as we wrap up the pilot and are able to share the findings from that in our next demo day. So I hope that you will be able to attend that. And in the meantime, you can visit our website. There's research and case studies about the work we've done. And we will continue posting about our ongoing efforts to pilot and learn from building and testing these tools. So that's it from us for now. We've really appreciated the chance to share all of this with you today. We do have some time to answer questions, and I see some questions coming into the Zoom Q&A feature. If you do have questions bubbling up right now, please use the Zoom Q&A, and we will get started with some questions that have been posed already. So let me take a look here. I am seeing, okay, a couple of just foundational questions. What LLM are you using? What's the model? Currently, we are using GPT-4o, but we have built the chatbot in a way where that is, it's not locked in. Fahd, you can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but we use, excuse me, a tool called Light LLM that makes it really easy to kind of swap which model it uses. And behind the scenes, while the pilot is running, we're doing some testing with, for example, Claude 3.7 and other models to compare the performance. I did see a number of questions along the same theme here in terms of the citations. So someone asked, have you ever noticed hallucinations in the citation material? How is the source material printed? Is it just an addition to the prompt on the back end that requests a citation and the format? So this we have not noticed that hallucinations in the citations because they are not generated by the LLM. They are directly pulled from the content. It is a direct quote from the source material. So as you mentioned, that is happening separately on the back end once the LLM has identified which content it referenced, then we can pull directly from that content to cite. A few questions about keeping that content up to date. So someone calls out, of course, with recent policy changes happening rapidly, how does the chatbot handle information that is changing over time? This is something that we, for the purpose of piloting, we have a process in place where on a weekly basis, we're re-ingesting that content from the sources. That is what I will describe as sufficient for the purpose of piloting, but is something we have some ideas to improve the cadence and be able to make that a kind of a faster loop beyond the pilot. Some questions about where design and research fits into this process, which I do want to acknowledge. We don't have our team's design and researchers presenting today. I do encourage folks to go back to some of our prior demo day presentations where we did share more about the early research and discovery we did, as well as what it looked like to kind of experiment and prototype through the design process. Oh, I just saw a question in chat. Are those demos available online? They are, and let me go back to put that link on the screen here. Someone else on the topic of design, someone else had asked, sorry, I'm scrolling to find it. Can you talk more about how you collaborated with design? Curious what was design's role in addressing technical challenges? I know that our designer researchers are in the audience today, so feel free to jump in to say more about this in chat, but I do just want to emphasize the collaboration between design and engineering and myself, the product manager, has been wonderful and very tight throughout this process. So our designers are very involved in obviously both doing the research up front to help determine kind of what is the right interface, what are the right ways to display this information, and thinking about some of these features and functionality like how should the guardrails behave? What guardrails do we need? What content should be pulled into those? They're also heavily involved in actually watching the usage of the chatbot and helping us think through what are the implications and the insights that we can derive from this, and what does that mean for how we adapt the features and functionality. I'm looking for a question that might be on the more technical side. Oh, actually, here's one, not so much on the technical side, but a question here. Is the scenario about income increases making someone ineligible for certain benefits, so the benefit cliff scenario, is that currently supported or is it on the roadmap? I can clarify, it's not something that's part of the chatbot, but Britt, maybe you can talk a bit about how that is supported in the Benefit Navigator.
Sure. So when someone does a Benefit Navigator intake, they get an eligibility report after that intake, which takes 6 to 10 minutes to complete the intake. And that report is going to line out everything that they are currently receiving, all the benefits and tax credits they could potentially be receiving. And then at the bottom of that report, we have a scenario feature where you can adjust income. You can also go backwards in that intake and adjust household factors. But when you run that scenario, it's going to spit out a new report that shows you a side-by-side comparison of eligibility with that current amount of income versus eligibility with that scenario, that change in income. And you can see it all side by side. And then we actually show you a column that gives you the difference between the two, whether that's positive, negative, or zero. So yes, the chatbot's not going to answer a question about that. because it's not, the chatbot's not running calculations. But there may be a more broad set of questions that you could ask if, X factor changes in my household, how does that impact our eligibility for X program? But the scenario feature within the benefit navigator is where you can get a more comprehensive and accurate calculation on how those changes are going to look.
Thank you for explaining that. Here's a bit more of a technical question. So for information from external sources outside your RAG database, do you collect and store local copies? And if so, how do you keep your copy up to date? I sort of referenced that we have a process for re-ingesting, but Fuad, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what we do with that data?
Could you please repeat the question, Diana?
Sure. So the first part of the question was for information from external sources, do you collect and store local copies?
Sure. Yeah. So our approach is our approach to extracting information from websites is not necessarily stored locally, but rather stored in a cloudless server with best practices with information security. That does include storing those chunks in our RDBMS Postgres database with the PG vector extension. Does that answer your question? I think, yeah. I would also actually follow up with another question that I saw in the chat here, and just to tag on to the different to the selection of using PG vector as opposed to Pinecone or another FAI SS system. We found that the native integration PG vector does allow for fast local development and schema iteration, as well as the flexibility of potential best practices with information security, keeping things in house.
Thank you, and thanks for that addition. I wanted to follow on with that. There was another question about kind of privacy and security. So, very reasonable, very common question. How do you ensure data privacy and security, especially in the context of using LLM services like ChatGPT? What if a user wants or needs to send PII? We have, for the purpose of this pilot, and actually I think, Britt, you can correct me if this is wrong, but actually for the Benefit Navigator tool itself, we are somewhat avoiding that problem because we don't allow or set the expectation with our pilot participants not to enter PII in the tool. And certainly for the chatbot, the goal there is really kind of questions about benefits. It's not, we set the expectation that it's not going to be able to answer, a person-specific scenario. It's really more of the general information, the interpretation of the policy and the rules and things like that. I do want to acknowledge that's an operational answer to a technical question, and that there are real considerations for that. So Fuad, I don't want to put you on a spot to speak about something that we ourselves haven't actually implemented for this, but do you want to add anything just about the considerations for privacy and security that we could think about if we were going to go in the direction of working with PII?
Yeah, we've explored various approaches to anonymization or de-identification of sensitive entities. We've certainly explored various packages out there that do not use LLMs, but rather traditional NLPs that can be where the models can then be stored on more provisioned servers. And that is, as it relates to the information we are extracting, that can be something we do process. We typically use AWS for our infra, and so any sort of information that does need to be housed in secure objects can be done so through AWS. There are various certifications that AWS does provide, including HIPAA and others. So that's what I will say about that. We are actively aware of the opportunities to add a de-identification step to our pipeline.
Thank you. Eric, you might be typing an answer to this one, but can I get you to answer out loud? I see a question about evaluation where it asks, your evaluation focuses on improving the navigator experience compared to increasing the likelihood of connectivity or enrollment success for the applicant directly. Is there a way to measure both or each?
Yeah, we would love to do this. In some cases, I think that agencies do follow up with clients about outcomes and things like that. I think that the visibility is a bit limited though, because of this is being deployed in the context of navigation. So there's people trying to find out what they might be eligible for and being kind of pointed at the right resources, as opposed to a deployment that might be at a county office where there's eligibility workers who could be using a tool like this. So to the extent possible, we will try to analyze that data. It's just that it may not be as systematically available as we would hope to, do something really credible. So.
Thank you. And Britt, I know that's overall the topic of impact evaluation for the navigator itself, the benefit navigator is something you've thought a lot about. Do you want to talk a bit more about how you're tracing the outcomes from screenings and things like that?
Yeah, so since the beginning of our initial pilot, we've had a third-party evaluation partner that built out, for the initial pilot, we did a control group and a treatment group to see how the benefit navigator was impacting client outcomes and case manager workflows. There were some really interesting things that came out of that initial pilot evaluation, and I'll just point to one, which was that in our treatment group, we saw an increase in income of 24% for about just under half of the user group. And by comparison, the control group experienced a downshift in income of about 16%. And so what we were learning from that is that because the initial pilot group was working with severely low income population, having the visibility on the benefit cliff to see that they actually had quite a lot of room to increase their income before they would experience a benefit cliff, it gave them a lot of confidence to make a decision to take on additional hours, take on more work, because they knew that the disruption to their benefits wouldn't be experienced until they reached a much higher amount of income. So that was one of the interesting learnings from the initial pilot. But all that to say, we have had a third-party evaluation running underneath this whole pilot period since March of 2023, so that we could see how the benefit navigator was impacting, benefit uptake, changes in earned income, and case manager workflows, case manager, satisfaction in their job, feeling like they were being able to navigate the benefit landscape with their client in a more effective way. And we will be publishing some updated results from the initial pilot, and also are going to be publishing a much broader paper about the whole pilot period as we wrap that pilot up. So we'll be sharing that.
Britt, can I keep you in the hot seat? I see a couple of different questions talking about possibilities or plans to try this in other counties. Could other California counties use this as well? Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. So we are starting to work with Long Beach Community College, and also have our sights on working with other community colleges across the state as a way to expand outside of LA County. And so we're, as we're looking at all of that geographic expansion, the chatbot would be a part of that experience. for any of those new user groups. And then we also are having conversations about piloting in DC and New York, potentially Chicago as well. And so all of those places, anywhere that we're going to be expanding, we want the chatbot to be part of the navigator experience. So excited to get this into the hands of additional users. And as we move out of this pilot with our subset of our pilot group, we are definitely interested in getting the chatbot into the hands of all of our current users. So definitely wanting to expand access in that way. And then I did see someone else had a question about whether we were working with navigators. Let's see. Are you piloting with caseworkers in LA or navigators outside the city's official staff, or both? So we are working with a network of community-based organizations, some of which are contractees of LASA and the Department of Health Services, but they're all community-based organizations providing direct service in their community. So the subset for the chatbot pilot includes organizations like Salvation Army, St. John's Community Health, Housing Works, LA Conservation Corps. So those are the folks that we're working with now, but certainly happy to work with anyone in the city.
Wonderful. Thank you for talking that through. We are on our last minute here. I don't think we'll have time to fully answer any more questions, but I'll maybe just leave. There's a great question here. What were some of the biggest and unexpected challenges in getting the product to this pilot stage? I'll invite any of my teammates who are on the call to put your own answer in the chat, and maybe just open it up if anyone wants to share a reflection on that. I think for me, what comes to mind is just recognizing the way it shifts the product development process. It's very easy to get something basic, get a product in place, but then the cycles and cycles and cycles of testing and evaluation to refine it and work through all of these scenarios that we've talked about, all of the kind of guardrails that we want to put in place. Just making sure that we really made space to invest in that testing and iteration really thoroughly before putting it in the world and putting it in people's hands. And I know we are right at time, so thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate your listening in today. There are some questions we didn't have a chance to get to, so we will work on getting some written answers to those and sharing those back out. And I think it was in the chat, but we will also be sending out the recording after this call. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.